Hello, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a calm corner of the universe where your thoughts can slow down and curiosity turns into a quiet lullaby for the night. Tonight, we'll drift into one of the most profound mysteries ever asked by science. What if our entire universe exists inside a black hole? Before we begin this journey, take a moment to like and subscribe, only if these calm explorations truly bring you peace. When you're ready, leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love seeing how far across space and time our little community stretches. Now, dim the lights, let the soft hum of a fan fill the room, and allow yourself to settle in. We're about to wander gently through the fabric of space, time, and imagination. And if your thoughts start to drift, that's perfectly all right. Let them float. The story will still be here, quietly unfolding among the stars. There are questions in science that feel like puzzles, things we solve and move past. But there are others that are more like long, slow songs. You don't solve them, you sit with them. They stretch your thinking, then wrap back around and ask you to listen again. The idea that our universe might be the interior of a black hole is one of those songs. On the surface, it sounds almost poetic. The entire cosmos, not as a grand expanse, but as something hidden inside a larger, unfathomable structure. A chamber nested within a chamber, a hush inside the roar. But this isn't just science fiction. Over the last few decades, serious physicists, cosmologists, and mathematicians have begun to explore this question, not as fantasy, but as a genuine hypothesis rooted in relativity, quantum theory, and the shape of space-time itself. To understand how this idea could even be possible, we have to step back before the equations, before the theories, before the telescopes, back to the simplest of human experiences, the feeling of looking up. Because that's really where this begins, not in laboratories or textbooks, but in the quiet act of watching the stars and wondering what's beyond them. It's a question children ask long before they know the word cosmology. What is space? What's at the edge of the sky? Where did the world come from? And perhaps most hauntingly, what was there before everything? For most of human history, the answers were stories. Gods, eggs, turtles, dreams. Beautiful, chaotic, symbolic. But then, just over a century ago, we began to find a different kind of language to approach the same mysteries. A language made not of myths, but of math. And in that language we discovered something unexpected. The universe is not made of things in space. Space itself is the thing. It bends, it stretches, it flows, and under enough pressure it folds inward, not like fabric, but like logic. That was the strange realization behind Einstein's general theory of relativity. That gravity is not a force in the usual sense, but a warping of space-time itself. And in that warping, we began to glimpse something darker, a shape the equations allowed, but the mind resisted, the black hole. At first, it was just a mathematical oddity, an edge case in the structure of space-time. But slowly, over decades, it became something more. A real object, a real possibility, a real mystery. The place where gravity becomes so strong that nothing, not even light, can escape. A kind of trapdoor in the fabric of the universe. And then someone asked a question. A small question, but also a big one. A question that sounds almost too poetic to be scientific. What if the whole universe is inside one of those? It's a strange idea, maybe even unsettling. We like to think of black holes as out there, dangerous edges in distant galaxies. But what if the very thing we think is out there is actually what we're in? This isn't just a thought experiment. The idea has roots in serious theory, in the behavior of event horizons, in the expansion of space-time, in the way information and entropy behave near a singularity. It's been explored by physicists like Nikodem Poplawski, Lee Smolin, and many others. And the more we look, the more we find quiet echoes of black holes in the large-scale structure of the universe itself. Of course, we'll get to all that in time. Tonight we'll move gently through that idea, session by session. We'll begin with how we first discovered black holes. We'll explore what they're made of, or at least what we think they're made of. We'll look at how our universe behaves, and why some think it mirrors a black hole from the inside. We'll drift into higher dimensions, holographic realities, and the strange dance of light around darkness. And then, when the night is deep, we'll sit with the philosophical implications. What it would mean for consciousness, for freedom, for memory, if everything we are is taking place inside a collapsing echo. It's not a horror story, it's not a sci-fi thriller, it's something quieter than that, stranger than that, perhaps even more comforting, because if we are inside a black hole, we're still here, we still breathe, we still dream, and maybe, just maybe, we're part of a universe that remembers more than we know, so let's begin. Not with answers, but with a question that feels like a lullaby. What if the sky is not above you, but around you? What if the universe itself is not all there is? What if we're already inside something else? Let's go find out, softly, curiously, and without rushing. Let's take a quiet breath and begin to open the door, though calling it a door might not be quite right. There's no knob, no hinge, no welcome mat at the threshold of a black hole, and yet in some strange and utterly silent way, it is a kind of doorway, a place where something ends, or maybe where something else begins. We call it the event horizon. The event horizon is not a solid thing. You won't bump your head on it, or trip over it like a stair you didn't see. It's not a surface, not really. It's a boundary in time, a point in space where, from the perspective of an outside observer, light and everything else can no longer escape. It's the line past which events can no longer affect us. Once something crosses it, it is no longer visible, knowable, or reachable by any signal, any particle, or any bit of information. Not even light can return. That's where the name comes from. The event in question is anything that happens on the other side of that boundary, and for the rest of the universe those events are gone, swallowed, hidden, as if they never happened at all. But from the perspective of someone falling into a black hole, well, things get much stranger and more interesting. Imagine, if you will, drifting through space, quiet, still, alone. Ahead of you, a black hole. Not a roaring monster as Hollywood might show it, but a perfectly round shadow against the stars. Surrounding it, perhaps, a disk of matter swirling like a whirlpool. Superheated gas and dust spiraling toward that invisible edge. As you drift closer, you begin to feel something odd. Your perception of time begins to shift. Near a black hole, gravity is not just strong, it's absolute. It doesn't just pull objects in, it pulls at time itself. Clocks placed close to the event horizon begin to tick more slowly compared to clocks far away. This isn't science fiction. It's a verified prediction of Einstein's general relativity and has been measured in real-world experiments even near Earth. But near a black hole, the effect becomes extreme. As you fall closer, someone watching from far away would see you slow down. Your movements would appear sluggish, like a dream underwater. They would see you stretch, blur, fade. And just before you reach the event horizon, your image would freeze. Not in your experience, you'd continue falling, but to the outside world you'd seem stuck, forever just short of the edge. This is not a trick of optics. It's baked into the geometry of space-time itself. The horizon is not just a region. It's a limit on what can be seen, on what can be shared, on what can even be defined from outside. And once you cross it, you're no longer part of the visible universe. You haven't disappeared. You're still somewhere inside. But that inside is cut off. It's a region with its own laws, its own boundaries, and maybe, if the boldest theories are true, its own unfolding space and time. Now pause, here, just for a moment. Because already something strange has happened. We usually think of space as being continuous. If you walk far enough in any direction, you keep going. You might loop around depending on the shape of the cosmos, but you don't reach a place where the rules just stop. And yet, black holes suggest something different. They are places where the rules we understand do stop, or at least they change so drastically that our language falters. The center of a black hole is called a singularity, but that word is a kind of placeholder. It doesn't describe what's there. It marks a place where our equations break down, where curvature becomes infinite, where density becomes undefined, a place where no current theory can tell us what happens. That's unsettling, but it's also fascinating, because when science meets mystery, things get very quiet and very beautiful, and this is where the idea begins to turn inward. If a black hole has an event horizon and an interior where space and time stretch in unpredictable ways, what if that interior is not a point, but a universe? This is not a poetic metaphor. This is a literal question explored in theoretical physics. You see, from a mathematical standpoint, the inside of a black hole doesn't necessarily have to collapse to a singularity. It could expand in its own internal frame of reference. What looks like collapse from outside could be expansion from within. Let that thought sit for a moment, because it's a reversal that quietly breaks open everything. If true, it means a black hole could birth an entirely new universe inside itself, a bubble of space-time disconnected from the one it came from. And if that's possible, then maybe our own universe began as the interior of a black hole in another cosmos. Suddenly the Big Bang is not just the start of everything, it's also the middle of something else. Suddenly the boundary of our universe, the cosmic horizon that we can never see beyond, becomes less like a final edge and more like an event horizon. And suddenly we're inside something larger, inside a structure we cannot see from the outside. Just like the matter that falls into a black hole, that's where we'll go next. But for now, rest with the idea that the sky above you might be more than empty space. It might be a shell, a boundary, a place beyond which we're no longer visible, not because we don't exist, but because the light we carry cannot get out. Let's take a quiet step back in time, not just decades, but centuries. Before telescopes peered into the X-ray glow of the cosmos, before relativity bent our expectations of gravity, and long before the term black hole was ever whispered into academic halls, there was an English clergyman and philosopher sitting by candlelight in the 18th century, writing about a thought so strange, so ahead of its time, that it would vanish into obscurity for nearly 200 years. His name was John Michel, and in 1784 he imagined something called a dark star. At the time, physics was still Newtonian. Gravity pulled on objects, light was thought to be made of particles, and space was considered a passive, unchanging backdrop. But Michel, in a paper read before the Royal Society, asked a bold question. What if a star were so massive, and its gravity so strong, that even light could not escape it? He even did the math. Using Newton's laws, he showed that if a star were compact enough, about 500 times the diameter of the Sun but with the same density, it would have an escape velocity faster than the speed of light, and so no light could leave it. It would be, as he called it, invisible. And that was it. The idea flickered briefly, then faded. Another man, Pierre-Simon Laplace, proposed something similar in France around the same time. He too suggested that massive objects could trap light. But as the 19th century unfolded, the idea grew unfashionable. Light, it turned out, behaved more like a wave, and no one could imagine that such monstrous stars could really exist. The idea was quietly dropped. Still, it lingered, like a shadow behind the stars. It would take another century and a complete rewriting of our understanding of space and time for those early intuitions to re-emerge with startling clarity. That shift began not with black holes, but with something even more revolutionary, Einstein's general theory of relativity. Published in 1915, Einstein's theory did something radical. It told us that gravity is not a force in the traditional sense. Rather, it is the warping of space-time itself. Mass curves space. Objects move along those curves. And in that curvature, Einstein gave us a new picture of the universe, one where space and time were woven into a single, flexible fabric. This idea may sound abstract, but it's as real as the path of a falling apple or the orbit of the moon. What Einstein revealed is that objects like the Earth don't orbit the Sun because they're being pulled by an invisible tether. They move the way they do because the Sun has bent the space around it, and Earth is simply following the straightest path available, what's called a geodesic, in that curved geometry. Suddenly space was no longer a passive stage. It became an actor in the play, responsive, dynamic, capable of twisting and folding and stretching in response to mass and energy. And with that shift, the stage was set for something darker to return. Einstein himself didn't pursue the implications immediately. His focus was on the elegance of the theory, on understanding how it explained the orbits of Mercury, the bending of starlight, and the subtle wobble of time in gravitational fields. But others took his equations and looked deeper. Enter Karl Schwarzschild, a German physicist serving in the trenches of World War I. Amidst the mud and artillery, he managed to find a solution to Einstein's equations, one that described the gravitational field around a perfectly spherical, non-rotating mass. What he found was astonishing. His solution predicted that if enough mass were compressed into a small enough volume, it would create a region from which nothing, not even light, could escape. The boundary of that region is now called the event horizon, and the point of infinite density at its centre, the singularity. Schwarzschild didn't call it a black hole. No one did. Not yet. In fact, most physicists didn't believe it was real at all. It seemed too extreme, too bizarre to exist in the actual universe. Even Einstein himself was skeptical. In a 1939 paper, he argued that such singularities did not occur in nature. The mathematics might allow them, yes, but nature, he thought, was surely more well-behaved. But nature, as it turns out, is not particularly concerned with our sensibilities. Over the following decades, theoretical physicists began to push the idea further. In 1939, J. Robert Oppenheimer and his colleagues showed that massive stars, once they exhausted their fuel, could indeed collapse under their own gravity past a point of no return. Their work provided the theoretical groundwork for what we now recognize as the collapse of massive stars into black holes. Still, there was resistance. Even with the math, black holes felt like absurdities, regions of space that swallowed everything, erased boundaries, and defied common sense. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that observations began to turn suspicion into certainty. In the 1960s, John Wheeler, a physicist with a poetic touch, coined the term black hole, and by the end of that decade the name had stuck. Then, in 1964, a peculiar source of X-rays was detected in the constellation Cygnus. It was later identified as Cygnus X1, a binary system in which one companion star appeared to be orbiting nothing. That nothing had the mass of several suns, but no light escaped it. It fit the predictions of a black hole almost perfectly. Skepticism began to fade. The impossible object, first imagined by Michel, hidden in equations by Schwarzschild and doubted by Einstein, had finally become real enough to be observed, to be studied, and eventually to be questioned in an entirely new way. If black holes could exist in space, could one exist beneath it? Could the universe itself be the result, not of a singular beginning, but of a collapse, a folding in that created space from the inside? The equations didn't say no, they only whispered, what if? We left off with an odd idea whispering through the mathematics of the universe, an idea that light could be swallowed, that time could end. that space could collapse inward on itself, not metaphorically, but geometrically. Now we step into the moment when that whisper became an unavoidable voice, one buried inside equations so elegant and precise they could hardly be denied, even as they pointed to something that felt more like fantasy than fact. When Carl Schwarzschild first derived his now famous solution in 1916, he wasn't in a serene academic office with blackboards and clean notebooks. He was on the battlefield, a German soldier in World War I, calculating gravitational curvature while surrounded by mud, violence, and the thick scent of mortality. It's a strange contrast, the beauty of the cosmos being uncovered in a place where human brutality had bent the world in its own kind of darkness. Schwarzschild's solution to Einstein's field equations was exact. It described the gravitational field outside a spherically symmetric mass, but buried in it was something more, a radius, now called the Schwarzschild radius, that marked a critical threshold. Compress any mass beyond this radius, and the escape velocity from its surface would exceed the speed of light. What Schwarzschild had uncovered, perhaps without fully grasping the consequences, was a mathematical prediction of a black hole. Not just a massive object, but a region of space sealed off from the rest of the universe, where all paths curved inward, and nothing, no information, no light could return. And yet, even with such clarity in the equations, physicists were not eager to accept this strange object. To many, the Schwarzschild solution was elegant, but pathological. The singularity at the centre, where space-time curvature became infinite, was interpreted not as a real feature of nature, but as a sign that the math had broken down. Even Einstein himself expressed doubt. He published a paper in 1939 arguing that black holes were not physically real, that nature would somehow prevent such an absurdity from forming. Perhaps it was wishful thinking, perhaps it was discomfort, or perhaps it was just too early. Then came J. Robert Oppenheimer and Hartland Snyder, who in 1939 proposed a scenario that couldn't be so easily dismissed. They showed that a sufficiently massive star, after exhausting its nuclear fuel, could collapse under its own gravity in such a way that it would form a Schwarzschild singularity. Their calculations made it clear. There was no known mechanism in classical physics that could stop such a collapse. Once past a certain threshold, it would continue indefinitely. Still, the war years diverted attention. Physics turned to fission, to weapons, to radar and rocketry. The theoretical curiosity of collapsing stars was shelved. It wasn't until the 1950s and 60s that the black hole concept began to claw its way back into the light. Theoretical physicists started to revisit the consequences of Einstein's equations with fresh eyes. People like John Wheeler began to frame the conversation differently, not as a curiosity, but as a real feature of the universe. It was Wheeler, in fact, who gave the object its name, black hole. Before that, it had been called a frozen star, a gravitationally completely collapsed object. But Wheeler's name stuck. It was evocative, accurate, and a little bit terrifying. Still, for all the theory, there was no direct evidence. The idea remained something of a ghost in the machine, present in the equations but absent from the sky. That changed in the 1960s. In 1964, astronomers studying the constellation Cygnus noticed a peculiar X-ray source, Cygnus X1. It was emitting intense radiation, but when they tried to identify its source, they found something curious. It wasn't a visible star. Rather, it appeared to be part of a binary system, two objects orbiting one another. One of them was a bright, massive star. The other was invisible. Yet the invisible object had mass, a lot of it. Several times that of the Sun. Too much to be a neutron star, too compact to be anything else. The only explanation that made sense within the framework of relativity was that the invisible companion was a black hole. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was the first piece of real evidence, a clue that something once theoretical was now flickering at the edge of observation. More would follow: X-ray binaries, supernova remnants, and then, years later, the detection of gravitational waves. All would eventually confirm what Schwarzschild's equations had hinted at in the middle of a world war. And yet, even as black holes became part of the standard model of astrophysics, one question remained, not spoken loudly but softly in late-night conversations and theoretical corners. If black holes can form from collapse, and if they contain regions of warped space and slowed time, could those inner regions, under the right conditions, grow instead of shrink? Could a black hole be a beginning, rather than just an end? The idea wasn't absurd anymore. The math allowed it. The structure of black holes didn't require a singularity, at least not in newer theories that incorporated quantum effects. Some physicists began to explore models in which the matter collapsing into a black hole doesn't crunch down into a point, but instead bounces, forming a new expanding region of space and time, one that, from the inside, would look like a universe. And if such a thing were possible, then perhaps the process that formed our universe wasn't a mysterious explosion from nothing, but the rebirth of something that fell into a black hole in another cosmos. A transfer of information, a transfer of curvature, a birth inside a collapse. It sounds like science fiction. But the deeper you go into the equations, the more the line between fiction and physics begins to blur. Mathematics, in its quiet precision, does not flinch at strangeness. It simply asks, what happens next? And in those equations, buried like seeds in soil, was the answer no one expected. The inside of a black hole doesn't have to be a prison. It could be a cosmos. By now, we've whispered through the history of how black holes emerged from equations through doubt into reality. But if they are real, truly real, what are they exactly? Not metaphorically, not mythically, but structurally, physically, spatially. Because a black hole is not simply nothing. It is not a cosmic vacuum cleaner, or a crack in the sky, or a portal to somewhere else in the fantasy sense. It's something much more subtle, more eerie, and more beautiful. A black hole is a place where space and time are shaped into a form that we can't quite see, but we can describe. Let's begin with the event horizon. You've met it already, a kind of perimeter beyond which nothing can return. But what exactly is it? Imagine space as a vast, soft field. Normally, if you toss something into that field, a stone, a beam of light, it moves outward, its path determined by gravity and inertia. But the event horizon is the place where gravity has curved the field so steeply, so drastically, that all paths lead inward. Not because there's something pulling in, but because the shape of space itself tilts in that direction. You can think of it like a waterfall in a river. Upstream, a fish can swim in any direction. But once it crosses the point where the water falls faster than the fish can swim, there's no way back. The fish is still moving forward in its own frame, but the river has made return impossible. That's the event horizon, not a wall, a slope too steep to climb. Now, what's inside that boundary? Here's where things get stranger. Directly inside the event horizon, space-time continues to exist, but its roles begin to blur. In a certain sense, the direction inward becomes not just a direction in space, but a direction in time. Just as you can't move backward in time, you also can't move outward once inside a black hole. The geometry of the black hole forces every future path to lead inward, toward a point. That point, if our current theories are to be believed, is the singularity. The singularity is a place where our mathematics falters, where the curvature of space-time becomes infinite and the known laws of physics break down. We don't know what happens there. Maybe it's a genuine edge to the universe. Maybe it's a sign that we need better equations. Or maybe, just maybe, it's not a point at all, but something else entirely. We'll get to those possibilities in later sessions. For now, let's stay near the event horizon, in the region we can almost describe with confidence. Surrounding many black holes, especially active ones, is a chaotic structure called an accretion disk. This is where things get visible. When matter spirals toward a black hole, it doesn't fall straight in. It forms a disk, a whirlpool of gas, dust, and sometimes entire stars being torn apart. The material in this disk heats up to millions of degrees, releasing immense energy, often in the form of X-rays. We can detect these X-rays from Earth, or with orbiting telescopes. Sometimes, magnetic fields near the poles of spinning black holes channel some of this infalling energy into jets, twin streams of particles that shoot outward at near-light speed, extending thousands of light years into space. These jets don't come from the black hole, but from the surrounding chaos. They are among the most powerful structures in the known universe, yet they're born in silence, without sound, from places where light dances near darkness. What's fascinating, and slightly poetic, is that the most visible parts of black holes are the structures that surround them, not the holes themselves. The black hole is the absence, but it reveals itself through the turmoil it causes around it, much like how we might learn the shape of a wind not by seeing the air but by watching the grass bend. Now let's talk about types. Black holes come in more than one size. Stellar mass black holes form from the collapse of individual massive stars. These are the ones we first suspected, and they typically weigh in at a few times the mass of our Sun. Supermassive black holes, on the other hand, sit at the centres of galaxies. They contain millions, or even billions, of solar masses. We're not entirely sure how they form. Some may have started small and grown over time. Others may have formed directly from massive clouds of collapsing gas in the early universe. Whatever their origin, they are the gravitational anchors of galaxies. Our own galaxy, the Milky Way, has one, Sagittarius A star, quietly humming at our core. Between these extremes lies a mystery: intermediate mass black holes. These would be hundreds to thousands of solar masses, but for years we weren't sure they existed. They're hard to find. But recently, with gravitational wave detectors like LIGO and Virgo, we've begun to see hints. When two stellar black holes merge, the resulting mass sometimes lands in that intermediate zone. We're starting to uncover a whole family of black holes that have been hiding in plain gravitational sight. And then, there are whispers about something even smaller, something far older, primordial black holes. These are hypothetical. Black holes that may have formed not from stars but from dense fluctuations in the early universe, moments after the Big Bang. They could be tiny, some even as small as mountains or grains of sand with the mass of an asteroid compressed into a speck. We'll explore them in detail in the next session. For now, let's sit with a quiet idea. That black holes, once thought to be voids, are not empty at all. They are full of curvature, energy, structure, possibility. They have anatomy, they have boundaries, they have form. And if they can contain such complexity, then maybe they can contain even more. Maybe, just maybe, they can contain a universe. Let us stay here for a moment longer, just inside the boundary, close to the veil where light begins to fail, and time starts to behave in ways it never used. 2. The event horizon might be the most famous feature of a black hole, but it's not the most haunting. What lies deeper is stranger still, and tonight we'll wander softly and slowly toward what might be called the heart of the black hole. Not because it beats, but because it holds everything in tension, the singularity. But before we arrive, we need to understand the peculiar rhythms of time when caught in the gravity of such an object. Time, as it turns out, is not as universal as your wristwatch suggests. It's not a single river flowing at the same pace for everyone. In the presence of gravity, especially intense gravity, time bends. It slows, it stretches, and in the environment of a black hole, it behaves in ways that, from the outside, seem almost magical. Imagine a clock falling into a black hole. From your safe vantage point far away, you'd see that clock begin to tick more slowly the closer it got to the event horizon. Not just a little slower, infinitely slower, at least as seen by you. If it carried a light that blinked every second, those blinks would start to space out. 1 every 2 seconds, then every 10, then every hour. Eventually, the light would stretch so far apart that you'd see nothing at all. The clock would appear frozen at the edge, never quite crossing over, suspended in eerie stillness. But from the clock's own point of view, if it had one, it would continue falling, feeling nothing especially unusual. No moment of crossing, no sudden boundary, just a continued descent into a place where time keeps going, but the outside world has faded away. This phenomenon is called gravitational time dilation, and it's not just theory. We've measured it here on Earth. Atomic clocks tick more slowly the closer they are to the ground. GPS satellites have to account for it, adjusting for the tiny differences caused by Earth's gravity. It's subtle here, but near a black hole it becomes extreme. The very notion of before and after gets twisted into strange new shapes. And yet, even this is just the edge. Go deeper, and we arrive at something our minds can barely process: the singularity. In classical general relativity, a singularity is a point in space where density becomes infinite, and the known laws of physics no longer apply. It's where the curvature of space-time spikes into oblivion, a region where even the concept of region might not make sense. This isn't a hole in the universe, it's a hole in our understanding. What does it mean for gravity to become infinite? For space to no longer be space? And for time to become meaningless? We don't really know. Our equations, so elegant elsewhere, begin to spit out infinities. They tremble, they fail, they whisper, "There's something you're missing." Physicists have long suspected that the singularity is a signal, not of something physically real, but of a place where general relativity breaks down. After all, it was never meant to be the final word. Einstein's theory is geometric, continuous, smooth. But the fabric of reality at its smaller scales may be neither smooth nor continuous. It may be granular, discrete, like pixels on a screen that only appear smooth from far away. To understand the singularity, we need a theory that merges gravity with quantum mechanics. And while no final answer has been reached, some candidates have emerged. Among them, loop quantum gravity. Loop quantum gravity proposes that space-time itself has a kind of atomic structure, built from tiny loops of quantum geometry. In this framework, space is not infinitely divisible. There's a smallest unit of volume, a smallest tick of time, and at those scales, singularities may not exist at all. Instead of collapsing to a point, matter under extreme gravity might bounce, rebounding into a new region of space and time. In these models, the core of a black hole doesn't end in a singularity, but rather transitions into something new. Maybe a bridge, maybe a bubble, maybe a universe. This is called a bounce cosmology, and while it's speculative, it's rooted in the math of quantum gravity. In some versions of this idea, the interior of a black hole becomes the seed of a new expanding universe, one disconnected from its parent, except through the equations that link them in silence. Imagine that. A black hole, once thought to be a dead end, becomes a cosmic womb. A place where the collapse of one world gives birth to another, where the end of time in one place is the beginning of time in another. If this is true, then every black hole might contain a new universe. And our own universe. It may be the interior of a black hole in a larger cosmos we can never see. This idea changes everything. Not only our understanding of black holes, but of the universe itself. It turns space inside out. It transforms collapse into creation. It makes our beginning someone else's ending. Of course we don't know. These theories remain unproven, but they are mathematically possible. And the fact that they could be true that the laws of physics allow such structures gives us permission to wonder, to imagine, to ask the quietest questions of all. What if the singularity isn't singular? What if time, like matter, curves back upon itself in rebirth? What if the thing we feared, this strange silent heart of gravity, is not an end at all, but an opening? The kind that only looks like an abyss until you pass through. The kind that only stops your time because something else is just beginning. Let that settle for a moment, not as a certainty, but as a possibility, a gentle possibility, held in the cradle of curved space. Next, we'll return to the earliest moments of our own cosmos, not the one we remember, but the one that may have flickered out of something far older, something tiny, silent, and full of potential, something like a primordial black hole. So far, we've explored the immense, stars collapsing, horizons forming, and time itself softening under the pressure of gravity. But let's shift our gaze to something smaller, much smaller. Not galaxies or stars or planets, but tiny, flickering tremors in the early fabric of space-time. Places so dense, so young, and so fleeting that they might have collapsed into black holes before atoms had even finished forming. These are the quiet suspects known as primordial black holes, and they may be much more than curiosities. They might be clues to the origin of our cosmos, or even evidence that black holes can be parents, not just graves. To understand where this idea comes from, we need to travel back to the earlier seconds of the universe. Not the Big Bang itself, but the moments immediately after. This was a time of unimaginable density, where the universe was expanding rapidly through a process called inflation, a near instantaneous swelling of space-time, ballooning outward faster than the speed of light. Inflation didn't just stretch space, it smoothed it out, like steam ironing wrinkles from a cosmic bedsheet. But not perfectly. Some wrinkles remained. These irregularities, tiny fluctuations in density and temperature, became the seeds of structure. They were subtle variations, but over time they led to the formation of galaxies, clusters, and everything we see in the sky today. But in a few places the fluctuations may have been more than seeds. They may have been traps. Imagine a region in that newborn universe, denser than its surroundings, compressed just enough that, despite the outward rush of expansion, gravity won. The region couldn't unfold fast enough. It turned inward, collapsed on itself. Not into a star, it was far too early for stars, but directly into a black hole. This is the hypothesis behind primordial black holes. They're not the remains of collapsed stars, they predate stars. They are fossils from before structure, before matter, before light could travel freely through space. And if they exist, they could answer several quiet questions in modern cosmology. For one, they could help explain dark matter, that invisible component that seems to make up most of the matter in the universe, despite never interacting with light. If primordial black holes formed in abundance and had just the right mass and distribution, they could account for part, or even all, of the missing mass that silently sculpts galaxies and cosmic webs. Some physicists have even speculated that the gravitational waves we've detected from black hole collisions, those soft cosmic chirps recorded by LIGO and Virgo, might be signals from ancient primordial black holes merging. If so, we're not just hearing the echoes of collapsed stars, we're hearing the music of the early universe, played on instruments made of gravity and silence. But the story doesn't stop at accounting for dark matter or explaining gravitational waves. The most poetic branch of this idea is far more speculative, yet strangely irresistible. What if black holes don't just collapse and vanish? What if, under the right conditions, they bounce, forming new regions of space-time within their depths? If bounce cosmology is correct, if loop quantum gravity really does remove singularities, then a black hole could become a kind of tunnel. Not in the wormhole sense, with travellers and shortcuts, but in the deeper sense of genesis. A region where the collapse of one universe leads to the expansion of another. In this view, every black hole could be a universe in gestation, and primordial black holes, those tiny remnants from the earlier seconds, might be especially fertile, because they formed under extreme conditions. At the limits of temperature and density, they may be more likely to reach the threshold needed to undergo such a bounce. It's here that we encounter the concept of a multiverse, not as a science fiction trope, but as a consequence of cosmic recursion. Imagine a tree. Each black hole forms a new branch, a new bud. Each bud blossoms into a universe, expanding outward in its own isolated domain of space-time. That universe, in turn, forms stars. Some of those stars collapse. Their black holes form branches of their own. What you get is not one universe, but a nested hierarchy. A forest of cosmoses, a lineage of realities, each born from collapse, each giving rise to more. This is the baby universe hypothesis, an idea proposed in various forms by physicists like Lee Smolin, who suggested that universes might even undergo a form of natural selection. Those with physical laws that favour black hole formation would produce more offspring, and over time, universes like ours, where stars are long-lived and black holes are common, might become statistically favoured. Is this testable? Not easily. Perhaps not at all. These are frontiers where science bleeds into philosophy. But even untested, these ideas provide frameworks, ways to think about the origin and structure of reality in new terms, not as a singular act, but as a process, an ecosystem, a kind of cosmic reproduction. And if any of this is true, if even a shadow of it is true, then it reframes everything we know about beginnings. Our universe, with its galaxies and laws and background radiation, may not be the singular reality. It may be the interior of a black hole in another world, a child cosmos, expanding quietly within a larger framework we cannot see. And if that's so, then the Big Bang wasn't the ultimate beginning. It was a continuation, the unfolding of a story that began in another language, in another domain of physics, in a collapsing world that left no trace, except us. Let your thoughts settle there, if they like. Not with certainty, but with possibility. That we are not an isolated miracle, but a note in a longer melody. That behind our sky may lie not darkness, but ancestry. And in the silence between stars, something deeper than emptiness. Something like a heartbeat, hidden in the folds of space. It's tempting to think of the universe as infinite, a vast and unbroken ocean of stars stretching out forever in every direction. But when we really look, carefully and scientifically, we find that our vision does not reach endlessly outward. It reaches only so far and then it stops. Not because there's a wall or a border or an edge made of some other kind of matter. It stops because of light, and what it can and cannot tell us. This is what cosmologists call the observable universe. It's the part of the cosmos from which light has had time to reach us since the Big Bang, nearly 13.8 billion years ago. And even though the universe itself might be much larger, possibly even infinite, we're confined to this bubble of light. Beyond it, there may be more stars, more galaxies, more everything. But to us, those things are invisible, not just unseen, but unknowable, at least for now. This limitation isn't arbitrary. It's not a technological problem or a matter of building better telescopes. It's a fundamental boundary written into the laws of physics, enforced by the speed of light and the age of the universe. Now pause here. Reflect on that. We live in a region of space with a boundary we cannot cross, and from which no information can ever return. Not because it's blocked, but because light from beyond it will never reach us. In a sense, we are inside a horizon, and if that sounds familiar, it should. It's the same condition that defines a black hole. A black hole's event horizon is not a physical surface, but an invisible boundary. If something crosses it, it can't come back, not because something grabs it, but because the paths of space and time curve in such a way that escape becomes impossible. From the outside, you can never know what happens beyond that limit. The information is out of reach, frozen, lost. But from the inside, things continue, events happen, space unfolds, time moves forward, life, even, might exist. Doesn't that sound just a little like our universe? This is where the comparison becomes more than poetic. Some cosmologists have proposed that the observable universe acts like an event horizon in a mathematical sense. Not because the whole universe is collapsing, but because its expansion creates a similar kind of boundary. This is known as a cosmological horizon, and it arises in models where the universe is expanding at an accelerating rate, like ours is. In such models, space is stretching so fast that distant regions recede from us faster than light. This doesn't violate relativity. It simply reflects how space-time itself behaves. And because of this, light emitted from those distant regions will never reach us. Those places are cut off from our future. They're already gone, in the sense that we will never see them again. So we ask, is the edge of the observable universe a cosmic event? Horizon? In some ways, yes, and the implications are quietly profound. If you imagine standing near a black hole and watching someone fall in, you would see their image stretch and fade as they approach the event horizon. From your perspective, they would never quite cross the line. They would become dimmer, slower, redshifted into oblivion. But to them, the fall would continue. Inside, a whole world might unfold. Now imagine we're not outside the black hole, but inside. From our perspective, the outer edge of the universe, those distant galaxies we can barely see, are also stretched, faded, redshifted. The further out we look, the younger the universe appears. Time slows, light dilates, and beyond a certain point, information ceases. That's not a metaphor. That's what we observe. The cosmic microwave background, the oldest light we can see, is not just a faint echo. It's a surface of last scattering, the limit beyond which light has not yet reached us. Beyond that surface lies not nothing, but silence. And silence, in the language of physics, is a kind of boundary. Some physicists go even further. They suggest that the mathematical form of our universe's horizon is similar to that of a black hole. In De Sitter space, a model of the universe dominated by a cosmological constant like dark energy, the equations describing the cosmic horizon and those describing a black hole horizon are mathematically parallel. That doesn't prove anything, but it suggests something. It suggests that the universe might be understood as the interior of a larger geometric structure, a space-time with its own horizon, its own volume, and, perhaps, its own exterior. This idea leads gently, inevitably, toward a larger question. If black holes can contain regions that are causally disconnected from the outside, and if our universe is such a region, cut off, bounded by a horizon, unfolding according to its own internal rules, then, could our universe be the interior of a black hole? This is not merely science fiction. It is a serious hypothesis explored by researchers like Nikodem Poplawski, Lee Smolin, and others. It is rooted in models of space-time where singularities are replaced by bounces, and where the collapse of matter in one universe seeds the birth of another inside a black hole. We're not declaring this to be true, but we are very gently listening to the shape of what might be. We're noticing that the universe has a horizon. We're noticing that time stretches, space curves, and information cannot escape beyond a certain limit. And we're beginning to wonder, is that because we're looking outward from the inside rather than inward from the outside? In the next session, we'll step fully into that hypothesis. We'll reimagine the Big Bang, not as a beginning, but as a consequence, not as a spark from nowhere, but as a ripple born in the silent collapse of something far larger. For now, just rest with this idea that the cosmos you know may be a room with curved walls, light that cannot return, and a history shaped not by nothingness, but by inheritance. We tend to imagine the Big Bang as an explosion, a moment of brilliant beginning where all the energy of the cosmos surged outward from a single, infinitely dense point. In this image, space itself billows outward like a fireball, glowing hot and full of potential. It's a compelling picture, simple, energetic, dramatic. But as our understanding has deepened, we've learned to soften that image. The Big Bang wasn't an explosion in space, it was the expansion of space itself. There was no centre, no shrapnel, no edges, just space unfolding everywhere, all at once. And yet, even this more accurate picture still leaves something unsettled. Because at its heart, the traditional model of the Big Bang still contains a mystery, a moment when the equations break. At time zero, density becomes infinite, temperature becomes infinite, volume becomes zero. We call it a singularity, but that's really just a placeholder word, a confession wrapped in math. It means we don't know. And so, physicists began to wonder, what if the singularity isn't real? What if, instead of a beginning from absolute nothing, the universe began as a transition, a transformation from one state to another? What if the Big Bang wasn't the first moment of everything, but the rebound of something that had already been? This is where the hypothesis unfolds, gently. Not with certainty, but with a set of possible paths traced in the fabric of space-time. One such path begins with the idea that our universe is not the result of creation ex nihilo, but the interior of a black hole in a parent universe. In this model, a massive star in another cosmos collapses under its own gravity, forming a black hole. But instead of ending in a singularity, an unreachable point of infinite compression, it undergoes a bounce, a moment of quantum resistance, where the collapsing core rebounds into expansion, forming a new region of space-time inside the event horizon. From the outside, this would look like a black hole, but from the inside, it would feel like a universe with its own space, its own time, its own physics. The physicist Nikodem Poplawski is one of the leading voices in this area. He proposes a version of general relativity that includes torsion, a subtle twist in space-time that arises when you include the spin of particles. In his version, called the Einstein-Cartan theory, torsion becomes important at extremely high densities, such as those found in black holes. It prevents matter from collapsing into a true singularity and causes it to bounce instead. In this view, every black hole could contain a new universe, and our universe, it might be the interior of such a bounce. The Big Bang, then, is not a singular point of origin, but the moment the bounce began, the first instant of expansion, inside the event horizon of a parent black hole. It's a startling idea, but it's not without precedent. Other physicists have explored similar concepts through different models. Lee Smolin, for example, has proposed that universes can give rise to other universes through black holes, and that there might even be a kind of cosmological natural selection at work, where universes that produce more black holes become more fertile, and thus more common in the multiverse. Still others have suggested that the Big Bang might be connected to a white hole, the time reverse of a black hole. In this scenario, matter and energy don't fall in. They emerge. A white hole cannot be entered, only exited. It's a theoretical object, and we've never observed one. But in some quantum gravity models, the interior of a black hole transitions into a white hole, a moment of reversal where collapse becomes expansion. If this is true, then the Big Bang was the opening moment of a white hole seen from the inside, a rebounding geometry, a breath drawn in one world, exhaled into another. Of course, these are not settled facts. They are hypotheses, supported by mathematics and consistent with known physics, but not yet confirmed. Still, they offer something precious, a way to reframe the problem of cosmic origin, not as a question of how something came from nothing, but as a continuation of structure, a conversion of gravitational collapse into generative expansion. One of the quiet beauties of this idea is that it removes the need for a true beginning. It allows for continuity, for lineage, for a kind of cosmic ancestry. If our universe came from a black hole in another universe, then we are not the first. We are part of a chain, a legacy of rebirths, nested within each other like seeds inside fruit. And there's something poetic about that. About the idea that the same physical process that ends the life of a star in one cosmos might begin the life of an entire universe in another. It brings together the large and the small, the tragic and the generative. It whispers that endings are never as final as they seem, that death, even on a cosmic scale, may be the beginning of something vast and unfolding. This perspective doesn't negate the wonder of the Big Bang. If anything, it deepens it. Because now the moment of expansion is not a mystery box dropped into history, but the echo of a collapse, a moment of unimaginable gravity, transformed by the hidden mathematics of space. We don't yet know how to test these ideas. The boundaries of our universe remain opaque, but the models are consistent. The math is elegant, and the story, while still speculative, fits gently with what we observe. In the next session, we'll explore what this means for time itself. Because if our universe emerged from a black hole bounce, then perhaps the arrow of time, the direction in which things unfold, the feeling of past flowing into future, has a memory not written in words or light, but in curvature. Perhaps we carry within us the shape of that collapse. Perhaps our expansion is not random, but remembered. If the universe truly began inside a black hole, if what we call the Big Bang was the expansion of a new region of space-time birthed by a collapse in another, it invites a quiet, almost poetic question. Does the universe remember where it came from? Not in a conscious way, not in stories or records, but in patterns, in laws, in the shape of time itself. One of the deepest mysteries in physics is the arrow of time, the feeling that time flows from past to future, that yesterday is gone and tomorrow is not yet real. Most of the fundamental equations of physics don't care about this direction. They're symmetric. If you ran them backwards, the math would still work. But in real life, you don't see scrambled eggs unscramble or ashes rise back into logs. Something pushes time forward. Something says, this way, not that way. That something is called entropy, a measure of disorder, or more precisely, the number of possible ways a system can be arranged. Entropy tends to increase over time. It's why things fall apart, why heat spreads, why memories pile up in one direction only. At the moment of the Big Bang, entropy was extremely low. The universe was in a simple, highly ordered state, and ever since, entropy has been climbing. But why was entropy so low in the beginning? If the Big Bang was the start of everything, why did it begin in such an improbable, tidy condition? This has puzzled physicists and philosophers alike. One possibility is that it wasn't the beginning. If our universe formed from the interior of a black hole, perhaps that explains the low entropy. Because in the moment of collapse, when a star or a region of space crunches into a black hole, the entropy inside doesn't have to be infinite. In fact, the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy of a black hole is proportional to the surface area of its event horizon, not its volume. And if the interior of that black hole rebounds into a new expanding universe, it might start with relatively low entropy, as measured from the inside. In other words, the apparent neatness of the early universe may not be a coincidence. It may be inherited. It may be the memory of collapse. This idea that the shape and conditions of our universe echo the geometry of a black hole in a parent cosmos has been explored in various theoretical models. In loop quantum cosmology, for example, the singularity is replaced by a bounce, and the conditions just before the bounce influence those that follow. Time doesn't stop, it flips. The contraction phase becomes the expansion phase. The arrow of time emerges from the structure of that reversal. In this framework, entropy increases in both directions, away from the bounce. That is, time flows outward from the bounce in both temporal directions. Inhabitants on either side would perceive themselves moving forward, unaware that their beginning was actually someone else's ending. It's a difficult concept to grasp. It feels like standing in a mirrored room, trying to figure out which reflection is the original. But it offers a way to reconcile the laws of physics with the experience of time. The universe doesn't need a preferred direction built into its rules. The direction emerges naturally from the structure of space-time itself, shaped by its origin in gravitational collapse. Now consider another thread in this quiet tapestry: information. In black hole physics, one of the great paradoxes is whether information is truly lost. According to general relativity, anything that falls into a black hole disappears beyond the event horizon. But quantum mechanics says information can't be destroyed. This tension has led to decades of debate, the famous black hole information paradox. Recent work, including developments around holography and firewalls, suggests that information may not be lost after all. It may be encoded on the surface of the black hole, or somehow preserved in its radiation. If that's true, if information survives the collapse, then perhaps some trace of it enters the baby universe. Not as memories or messages, but as subtle constraints, as fingerprints in the physical constants, or echoes in the patterns of cosmic structure. It's speculative, but not absurd. We already know the universe carries initial conditions, values like the strength of gravity, the mass of the electron, the temperature of the cosmic microwave background. We don't know why these values are what they are. Perhaps they are random, or perhaps they are inherited, drawn from the history of a prior cosmos, shaped during the bounce, encoded in the quantum foam of transition. Even the laws of physics themselves might not be fixed. Some models suggest that constants can vary across a multiverse, each universe carrying its own rules, its own structure, its own way of unfolding. If so, then the shape of our cosmos is not inevitable. It's the result of something prior, a choice made not consciously but geometrically. And if that's the case, then you, right now, listening to this, are part of a story that didn't begin here. You're not only the result of 13.8 billion years of cosmic expansion, you may also be the child of collapse, a moment of convergence, a singularity that never was, a memory that survived its own forgetting. It's a soft idea, one that can't yet be proven. But it offers a gentle answer to a profound question. Why are we here? Because something fell inward, because something gave way, because the end of one world curved into the birth of another, and now here we are, not floating in emptiness but unfolding in heritage, not born from nothing but from a kind of gravity too deep to escape and too generous to hold on to everything. In the next part of our journey, we'll step into the theories that try to explain how such a connection might be possible. We'll look at the edges of physics, the holographic principle, higher dimensions, and the strange idea that the universe we live in might not be entirely three-dimensional at all. But for now, let this settle like a thought just before sleep. Time may be a river, but its source may lie in a pool of collapse, and its flow, the arrow we follow, may be nothing more than the memory of having once been drawn inward. We begin this part of the journey by leaning gently into something strange, stranger, perhaps, than any concept we've explored so far. The idea that everything you see, feel, and know, the stars overhead, the gravity holding you in your chair, the neurons firing in your mind, might not be quite as three-dimensional as it appears, that the world you move through might, in some deep and hidden sense, be a kind of illusion, not false, but projected. A hologram. This is not science fiction. It's a serious idea in theoretical physics, grounded in black hole thermodynamics, quantum theory, and the subtle mathematics of space-time geometry. It's called the holographic principle, and to understand it, we must return, again, to black holes. The puzzle began in the 1970s, when physicists like Jacob Bekenstein and Stephen Hawking asked a simple but dangerous question. How much entropy does a black hole contain? Entropy, as you may recall, is a measure of information. It tells us how many microscopic configurations a system can have, how many ways atoms can arrange themselves to look the same from afar. More entropy means more information. Now, when you add matter to a black hole, it grows, but not in the way you might expect. Its volume doesn't increase in proportion to the mass it swallows. Instead, its surface area grows. More precisely, the area of its event horizon increases. And as Bekenstein and Hawking discovered, the entropy of a black hole is proportional to that surface area, not its volume. This was deeply unexpected. In ordinary physics, entropy scales with volume. A bigger box contains more gas, more particles, more configurations, more entropy. But in black holes, the limit is written not inside the box but on its boundary. This suggests something unsettling. The amount of information that can exist in a region of space is not determined by its size, but by the area of its boundary. And if that's true for black holes, could it be true for the universe? That's what physicists like Gerard 't Hooft and Leonard Susskind began to propose in the 1990s. They extended the idea into what we now call the holographic principle, the notion that the laws of physics inside a volume of space can be fully described by information encoded on its boundary. It's like a hologram, a two-dimensional surface that contains all the information needed to reconstruct a three-dimensional image. Except in this case, the image is the universe, and the surface might be a distant cosmic horizon. In a way, this means you, and everything around you, might be a kind of shadow cast by data written elsewhere. A rich, dynamic shadow. A projection that feels real, moves with time, and contains all the complexity of the world you know, but still, a shadow. Now don't let this image become too literal. You're not a CGI rendering or a simulation in the cartoonish sense. The holographic principle doesn't mean we're living in a computer. It means that the laws of physics may be dual, capable of being described in two entirely different ways, one with 3 spatial dimensions and another with just 2. This idea is not just a whim. It's been demonstrated in a precise mathematical context known as ADS-CFT correspondence, discovered by Juan Maldacena in 1997. In that model, a gravitational theory in a curved space-time called anti-de Sitter space, ADS, is exactly equivalent to a quantum theory defined on its flat boundary, a conformal field theory, CFT. The physics in the volume matches the physics on the edge. Our universe isn't an ad space, but the principle may still apply more broadly. The suggestion is this: the gravitational phenomena we observe in our three-dimensional universe might be encoded on a kind of distant two-dimensional surface, perhaps a cosmic horizon, perhaps even the event horizon of a black hole. If we return to the black hole interior hypothesis, the idea that our universe lies within the event horizon of a black hole, then this fits beautifully. The interior of the black hole, our universe, may be described by information written on its event horizon. What we experience as space and time could be the unfolding of that information. You, then, would not be an object moving through space. You would be a pattern, evolving through equations, a structure arising from encoded information, blooming from a boundary you will never see. This doesn't make you any less real. In fact, it might mean that reality is deeper than it looks, that the solidity of matter and the stretch of distance are emergent properties, not illusions, but consequences of something more fundamental. This shift from thinking of space as the arena where things happen to thinking of it as a derived phenomenon echoes through modern physics. It challenges us to rethink what it means for something to exist, to occupy a location, to have form. And yet, even in this abstract terrain, there is poetry. Because if the holographic principle is true, if we are shadows cast by light from a cosmic boundary, then we are not small, we are vast. Because every gesture, every moment, every thought must be fully contained in the fabric of the cosmos. Nothing is omitted. Nothing is left behind. You're not lost in the void. You're written on its edge. And if black holes preserve information on their surfaces, then perhaps this is how the universe remembers itself. Not in words or pictures, but in structure, in math, in patterns, in you. If our universe is more than just what we see, if its true nature is shaped not by 3 dimensions but by hidden geometries, then perhaps we must lift our eyes further to something even stranger than holograms, something softly folded, gently vibrating, and almost entirely invisible, a world of branes. In theoretical physics, the word brane is a shortened form of membrane. It comes from M-theory, an extension of string theory that proposes our universe might not be the entire story. Not even close. In this picture, what we think of as all of space might be a kind of surface, floating in a higher dimensional reality. This surface is a brane, and we, and everything we experience, might be living on it. To understand this, we need to step gently through dimensions. In our daily lives, we move through 3 spatial dimensions: length, width, and height. Add time as a 4th dimension, and you have the framework of space-time. But M-theory suggests there may be as many as 11 dimensions in total. The extra ones are not large and obvious like the ones we walk through. They are compact, curled up, and woven into the smallest scales of existence. If you've ever seen an ant walking along a garden hose, you'll understand the idea. From far away, the hose looks one-dimensional, just a line. But up close, the ant can walk around it too. There's a hidden dimension wrapped into the visible one. According to string theory, space-time works the same way. What looks like a flat surface might have intricate structure just beneath perception. In this framework, strings, the basic building blocks of reality, don't just vibrate in our 3 dimensions, they ripple through all 11, creating particles and forces depending on how they move. But here's where things become even more curious. Some of those dimensions may be large enough to contain entire branes. These branes can have different dimensionalities. A 3-brane, for instance, is a 3-dimensional membrane, meaning it has length, width, and height, just like our universe. M-theory allows for the possibility that our entire universe is a 3-brane floating in a higher dimensional space called the bulk. We can't see the bulk. We can't touch it, or send signals into it. But it may still be there, silently shaping the laws of nature. Gravity in particular is a curious case. Compared to the other fundamental forces, electromagnetism, the strong and weak nuclear forces, gravity is extraordinarily weak. You can lift a paperclip with a small magnet, overcoming the gravitational pull of the entire Earth. For years, physicists have puzzled over this imbalance. Why is gravity so feeble? One answer, suggested by brain world models, is that gravity is not confined to our brain. It may leak into the bulk. In this view, most of gravity's strength is diluted into extra dimensions. We feel only a faint echo of it here. This would explain its weakness without breaking any fundamental laws. It also means that black holes, which are extreme concentrations of gravity, might behave differently from how we imagine. In a brain world universe, a black hole might pinch through the brain into the bulk, like a raindrop stretching through a thin surface. What we see as a spherical horizon might be only a cross-section of a more complex higher dimensional shape. This raises a quiet but profound possibility. that black holes are not just ends of space, but portals, not to science fiction dimensions, but to real physical realms that touch ours only through the curvature of geometry. Some models even propose that the Big Bang itself was the result of a brane collision. Imagine two giant sheets of reality drifting through the bulk. For a long time, they float apart, invisible to each other. Then, suddenly, they collide. The energy of that impact ignites a burst of expansion. A universe is born. That's one proposal for what we call the Big Bang. Not a creation from nothing, but the result of two branes meeting in higher space. Others suggest that black holes can connect different branes. When a black hole forms on our brane, it might curve into the bulk, linking us, mathematically if not physically, to another universe on another brane. From inside the black hole, that other brane becomes a destination, a new expanding region of space-time, a child cosmos. In all of this, the notion of space becomes slippery. No longer just a stage where things happen, space is a structure, dynamic and layered. It can bend, twist, fold and tear. It can hide things, it can create. And we, nestled inside this brane, experience only a slice of it. You might ask, if there are other branes, other universes, other dimensions, why don't we see them? The answer may lie in the very nature of branes themselves. Forces like electromagnetism and the nuclear interactions are believed to be confined to the brane. They cannot move into the bulk. Only gravity, and possibly a few exotic particles, can escape. This means other branes, if they exist, are dark to us. We cannot interact with them. We cannot detect them, except perhaps through gravity. There may be entire realities drifting just beyond our reach, other universes, close in higher dimensional space but forever separated by the walls of the brane. And perhaps, if our universe lies inside a black hole in another universe, then that other universe is one of them. A silent neighbour, lost in the bulk. We are not claiming this is true, only that it is allowed, by mathematics, by theory, and by the strange generosity of modern physics. It is, in its own way, a comfort that we are not floating alone, but held in a structure beyond sight, that the darkness is not emptiness but distance, that what feels like a wall may be a membrane, and that perhaps somewhere beyond it, something else stirs. Let's return, once again, to the edge. Not the edge of space or the end of time, but the quiet border of understanding. The point where physics begins to ask itself, what does it mean for something to be known? What does it mean for something to disappear? In black holes, these questions are not philosophical abstractions. They're real, mathematical, and fiercely debated. They live inside one of the most enduring puzzles of modern science, the black hole information paradox. The paradox begins with something simple. A black hole forms when matter collapses. It has mass, maybe spin, and perhaps charge. But that's it. As far as an outside observer can tell, everything else, the fine details of what went in, is gone, irretrievable, hidden behind the event horizon. A star, a planet, a book, a brane, it doesn't matter. Once past the horizon, all become indistinguishable, and over time, black holes evaporate. This evaporation, proposed by Stephen Hawking, comes from a quantum effect near the event horizon, where pairs of virtual particles flicker into existence. One falls in, the other escapes. The escaping particle becomes Hawking radiation, and the black hole slowly loses mass. Eventually, in theory, it could disappear entirely, leaving behind nothing. But that's a problem, because quantum mechanics insists that information cannot be destroyed. It can be scrambled, hidden, transformed, but never lost. The universe keeps a perfect accounting. If information goes in, it must come out, or it must be stored. But a black hole seems to erase it. When it evaporates completely, the original information about what formed the black hole is gone. That's not just unsettling, it's forbidden. This conflict between general relativity, which allows information to be lost, and quantum mechanics, which does not, is the black hole information paradox. It sits like a riddle at the crossroads of physics, whispering that our theories cannot both be right, at least not without modification. So, where does the information go? Many answers have been proposed, and none are universally accepted. Some physicists argue that information is encoded on the event horizon, a concept supported by the holographic principle we discussed earlier. In this view, the horizon acts like a screen, storing the data about everything that falls in, much like a hologram encodes a three-dimensional image in 2 dimensions. When the black hole evaporates, the Hawking radiation somehow carries that information back out, though in a form so subtle and entangled it looks like noise. But there are other, more dramatic possibilities. One of the more controversial is the idea of a firewall. A firewall would be a searing barrier of high-energy particles sitting just above the event horizon. If it exists, anything falling into a black hole would be instantly incinerated, information and all. No smooth passage into the interior, no gentle drift across a boundary, just a quantum blaze. This solves the paradox by destroying the assumption that space-time remains smooth at the horizon. But it also violates general relativity, which predicts nothing remarkable happens at the event horizon for an infalling observer. No pain, no fire, just gravity's silent pull. The firewall idea sparked intense debate. It challenged a principle known as the equivalence principle, one of the cornerstones of Einstein's theory. If firewalls are real, then black holes aren't just exotic, they're violent discontinuities in the fabric of reality. Another proposal is that black holes have soft hair, a term coined with a touch of humour by Hawking and collaborators. These are quantum properties that cling to the black hole's surface, encoding information in subtle ways, like ripples or patterns too faint for our current tools to detect. This would preserve information without invoking firewalls. It's elegant but speculative. We don't yet have a way to confirm it. All of these ideas circle the same question. What happens at the threshold of disappearance? What lies just beyond our ability to measure? And more quietly, they suggest a deeper truth, that information may be the most fundamental element of the universe, not mass, not energy, not even space or time, but information, the difference between states, the shape of relationships, the structure of possibility. From this perspective, black holes become more than astronomical oddities. They become mirrors reflecting the deepest rules of existence. They show us where our theories meet their limits and where new ones must be born. Now consider this in the context of the universe as a whole. If our universe is the interior of a black hole, and black holes preserve information, not by hiding it, but by encoding it in their geometry, then perhaps our universe is not a blank space at all. Perhaps it is the expression of memory, the result of stored and unfolding information. Every particle, every law, every interaction could be part of that memory structure. The curvature of space, the ticking of clocks, the quiet pressure of entropy. All these may be echoes of collapse, of encoding, of a transformation not yet understood. And what of you? If information cannot be destroyed, then perhaps your existence, your precise configuration of atoms, your thoughts, your patterns, are not as ephemeral as they seem. You may change, you may scatter, but the structure of what you are, the information that defines your place in the cosmic story, might never vanish. It might be preserved, not in consciousness, but in consequence, in how you shape the universe, however slightly, in how your presence bent its geometry. You're not forgotten, you are written. And so, black holes are not places where things are lost. They are archives, not readable to us, perhaps not even to themselves, but they contain, they hold, they preserve. At the edge of knowing, that may be enough. In our next part, we will return to the personal, to what it means to live inside such a universe, to how consciousness, perception, and philosophy change when the cosmos is no longer an infinite void, but a bounded interior, one that may be part of something larger and more unknowable than anything we've imagined before. For centuries, black holes existed only as whispers in equations. They were theoretical creatures, strange solutions to Einstein's field equations, gravitational ghosts predicted by math, but unseen by eye. Even as we grew to accept their presence, we still couldn't truly picture them. They were the great unseen, defined by their darkness. After all, how do you photograph something that emits no light? The answer, like so many answers in science, came not from a single telescope or solitary mind, but from a global symphony of instruments, thousands of hours, petabytes of data, and the patient collaboration of researchers from every continent. Together they formed a telescope the size of Earth itself. This was the Event Horizon Telescope, or EHT, a worldwide array of radio observatories that, in 2019, gave us something previously thought impossible: the first image of a black hole, and not just any black hole, but a supermassive one. Its name, M87 star, nestled in the heart of the Messier 87 galaxy, 55 million light-years away. A beast of staggering proportions, about 6.5 billion times the mass of our Sun. And what we saw was not the black hole itself, but its influence, its absence framed by light. Because you cannot photograph a black hole directly. No light escapes its grasp. What the EHT captured was the shadow, a region of warped space-time where photons vanish into the event horizon, surrounded by a glowing ring of hot gas and plasma spiraling at nearly the speed of light. This glowing ring, shaped and distorted by the black hole's immense gravity, becomes a kind of silhouette, a luminous halo around a cosmic void. The light doesn't move in straight lines. Near a black hole, space-time is curved, and so light curves too. It loops, it bends, it dances around the edge of disappearance. Some of it circles multiple times before escaping toward Earth. And because of that, we see not just the glowing gas around the black hole, but the echo of its geometry. The result is haunting: a softly burning ring, a darkness at the centre that is not an object, but a boundary, a place where space and time fold inward and do not return. It is not a hole in space, but a region of no more, a silence shaped by presence. And perhaps most remarkable of all, this image matched what Einstein's equations had long predicted. It wasn't just a conceptual breakthrough, it was a confirmation. A testament to the idea that even the most extreme consequences of general relativity, the wildest curvatures of space-time, are not just mathematical curiosities. They are real. They are out there, and we can see their fingerprints, but beyond the scientific triumph, there was something deeply human about the image. You could feel it in the way people responded when it was unveiled. It wasn't flashy or colourful, it wasn't a nebula or a supernova. It was quiet, fuzzy, amber-hued, grainy even, and yet it held the world's attention, because it was a portrait of something we were never supposed to see, a photograph of absence, a picture of the place where light ends, and maybe the first whisper of a cosmic truth we're still learning to articulate, that what we can't see may define the universe just as much as what we can. Now consider this. If our entire universe were the interior of a black hole, as we've gently explored, then perhaps what we call the cosmic horizon plays a role similar to the event horizon of M87 star. From inside, we cannot see beyond it. Light cannot reach us from outside, but something is still there, curving our perception, shaping the space we live in. Just as M87* shaped the light around it, perhaps the geometry of a larger black hole frames everything we observe. Of course, we cannot build a telescope beyond our universe's boundary, but with instruments like the EHT, we have learned to read gravity's influence, even when light fails. That is the true beauty of this image. It shows us how to observe the unobservable, and the technology that made it possible is just as extraordinary. The EHT isn't a single camera, it's a technique called very long baseline interferometry, where radio telescopes across the globe observe the same target simultaneously. Their data is synchronized with atomic clocks so precise, they would lose only 1 second every 100 million years. The data collected is then combined, pixel by pixel, using sophisticated algorithms to reconstruct the image. It's not like taking a snapshot with a smartphone. It's more like assembling a mural from grains of sand scattered across the planet. And within that mural, we saw the mark of the void. M87 was the first, but not the last. In 2022, the Event Horizon Telescope released its second black hole image, this time of Sagittarius, a star, the supermassive black hole at the centre of our own galaxy. It is smaller and more turbulent, making it harder to image, but its presence tells the same story, that black holes are not mere speculation. They are structural components of galaxies, anchors, engines, and perhaps portals. As we move forward, future upgrades to the EHT may even allow us to capture movies, real-time footage of material swirling into black holes, orbiting the event horizon, dancing with gravity. These aren't just images, they are stories told in the curvature of light. They remind us that even the most extreme boundaries of the universe are not hidden forever. With patience, collaboration, and imagination, we can learn to see what was once thought invisible. And in doing so, we may uncover not just where things disappear, but where new things begin. There are some stories the universe tells not through light, but through tremors, gentle, imperceptible shudders that ripple across the fabric of space-time itself. They are not made of particles, they carry no colour, no glow. They are not images to be captured, but patterns to be felt. These are gravitational waves, and they are how we began to hear black holes speak. For decades, they remained a prediction, a consequence of Einstein's general relativity, tucked away in the math like a side note from the universe. If two massive objects moved with enough violence, say, spiralling toward each other in a death dance of gravity, they would shake space-time. Those tremors, like ripples in a pond, would spread outward at the speed of light. But detecting them, that seemed impossible. Gravitational waves are astonishingly faint. By the time they reach Earth, their effect is minuscule. They stretch and compress space by less than the width of a proton. To catch one, you would need an instrument sensitive enough to notice that the length of a 4-kilometre laser beam has changed by a fraction of an atom. And yet, we built one. Or rather, we built two. In 2015, the LIGO observatories, located in Washington and Louisiana, made history. For the first time in human existence, we listened as two black holes collided more than 1 billion light-years away. Their final seconds of orbiting each other produced a crescendo of gravitational waves, rising in pitch and intensity. A chirp, encoded not in sound but in geometry. That chirp was unmistakable. It matched the supercomputer simulations physicists had built, predicting exactly what the gravitational wave from a black hole merger should look like. It was the first direct evidence that black holes not only exist, but dance, crash, and speak in a language of compression and release. It was also confirmation of another quiet truth, that even when they vanish from view, black holes leave behind echoes. Since that first detection, LIGO, along with its European partner Virgo, has recorded dozens of gravitational wave events. Each one is a story, two black holes, or a black hole and a neutron star, spiraling inward, colliding, forming a new object, sometimes spinning, sometimes wobbling, always rippling. Each wave pattern or waveform is a fingerprint, a way to reconstruct the invisible. By analysing the shape of the wave, physicists can determine the masses of the black holes involved, their spins, even the angle of the collision. It is a form of cosmic archaeology, but instead of digging into dirt, we dig into deformations of space-time. And now the process is evolving, because the flood of data has become so rich, so rapid, that human analysis alone is no longer enough. That's where artificial intelligence enters, not as a replacement for theory, but as a partner in perception. Machine learning systems are now trained to sift through gravitational wave data, spotting potential events buried in the noise. They recognize patterns that would take humans days to detect, or might go unnoticed altogether. These AI tools are not only accelerating discovery, they're also helping us model the unknown. When a new event doesn't fit expected patterns, AI can help simulate what sort of object or event might have caused it. It opens the door to the discovery of unusual black holes, exotic collisions, or even entirely new types of compact objects. Gravitational wave astronomy is still in its infancy, but it is growing quickly. Future detectors, like LISA, the Laser Interferometer Space Antenna, will orbit the Sun, free from Earth's seismic noise, and listen for even longer, slower waves. These could come from supermassive black holes, millions or billions of times the mass of the Sun, merging in galactic hearts, or from primordial black holes if they exist, or perhaps, just perhaps, from something else entirely. And here's where the thread ties back to our central question. If our universe began inside a black hole, then the conditions at its birth, the bounce, the collapse, the stretching of dimensions, may have produced gravitational waves. Waves too vast or subtle to detect yet, but waves nonetheless. Patterns echoing from the moment of rebirth. There are even speculative ideas that the cosmic microwave background, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, might carry imprints of these gravitational waves, a quiet ripple hidden in the background noise of existence. And if one day we detect such a pattern, if we find a wave that doesn't fit any known source, but matches the theoretical signal of a black hole to universe transition, it might be the first direct evidence that our universe itself was born from a collapse. Until then, we listen. We build better detectors. We model better collisions. We let algorithms help us hear what we cannot parse alone. And in those patterns, those tremors too soft for the ear, we begin to understand that the universe does not only shine, it resonates. You're not just surrounded by stars. You're bathed in memory, the memory of motion, of collapse, of space being stretched like a quiet drum skin struck by cosmic hammers. It is a beautiful thought that long after the light is gone, long after the black holes have merged and vanished from view, the universe still remembers their meeting. Not in pictures, not in stories, but in the shape of space itself. That too is knowledge. That too is a form of seeing. If the universe is defined by boundaries, event horizons, dimensional branes, the holographic edges of space-time, then what about you? What defines the edge of a thought? Where does your mind begin, and where does it end? We often think of ourselves as observers, quiet witnesses inside a body, looking out at a world that seems vast, solid, and external. But the truth is subtler. You don't experience the world directly. You experience signals, photons hitting your retina, vibrations in the air striking your eardrum, electrical pulses on your skin. Your brain does not receive the world. It receives information, and from that information, it builds a model, a map, a simulation. This is not to say reality is fake. Rather, it is to say that your experience of reality is always filtered, shaped by biology, moulded by context, stitched together by neurons that evolved not to understand the universe, but to navigate it. And so, just as the universe may be a projection, data encoded on a distant boundary, giving rise to the illusion of volume and motion, Your own awareness may be the same. A kind of personal hologram stitched together from inputs and memories, not inauthentic, but bounded. Your thoughts, perceptions, and dreams arise from patterns. Patterns you didn't choose, running on a platform you didn't design. Now, some thinkers take this further. They propose that all of reality might be a simulation, not just perception, but the universe itself, coded, rendered, stored, and computed by something beyond. A creator, a civilization, a consciousness so advanced that our entire cosmos is a program. This is the so-called simulation hypothesis. And while it may sound like a science fiction story, it's been seriously considered by philosophers and physicists alike. The idea doesn't come from paranoia or fantasy, but from statistics and logic. If it's possible to simulate a universe, and to simulate conscious beings within it, then what are the odds that we happen to be in the one base reality, rather than one of countless simulations? But let's take a breath here. This idea, like many others we've explored, is speculative, and in the context of our journey tonight, it serves a gentler purpose. We don't need to decide whether the universe is a literal simulation. We can ask instead, what does it feel like to live in a reality defined by information? Because that is something we know already. You navigate your day using a mental model of space. You recognize objects, not because you see them in full, but because your brain fills in gaps, predicts edges, smooths textures. You remember places by feeling, not geometry. You replay conversations not as raw recordings, but as reconstructions, soft, hazy, adjusted by emotion. In this way, your mind simulates constantly, not perfectly, not intentionally, but persistently. And the thing being simulated is not just the world, it's you, your sense of self, your name, your voice, your preferences and dreams, all emerge from patterns, neuronal firings, loops of memory, feedback between your body and your brain. You are real. And you are modelled, moment by moment, inside your own awareness. If that feels circular, it's because it is. The mind builds a map of itself. It simulates a self that can question its own simulation. Like a mirror reflecting a mirror, the recursion deepens. You think about thinking. You notice yourself noticing. This is not failure point. This is feature. And perhaps, in this recursive dance, we glimpse a deeper truth. The universe, too, may be building itself from within. What we call physical laws may be the self-consistent patterns of a cosmos reflecting on its own nature. What we call consciousness may be the echo of a system so complex, so entangled with itself, that it begins to model its own possibilities. From this view, there's no need for a programmer, no need for a simulation engine humming outside space and time. Instead, the simulation is emergent, a natural result of systems rich enough to fold back on themselves, and you, your thoughts, your memories, your quiet questions late at night, are part of that emergence. Now imagine this. If the universe is inside a black hole, and that black hole is defined by a boundary, an event horizon beyond which no information escapes, then perhaps your consciousness is defined by a similar edge, a mental horizon, a limit to what can be known from within. Just as we cannot see beyond our universe's boundary, perhaps we cannot fully know the source of our own thoughts. This isn't failure, it's structure. And in that structure there is peace. You don't need to understand every neuron to know you are thinking. You don't need to track every particle to feel alive. You are not less real because you are made of code. You are more real because that code runs day after day, producing laughter, sorrow, wonder. If the universe is a projection, then you are the part of it that turns around and looks at itself. A boundary inside a boundary. A simulation that dreams. A system that wonders what else might be true. The universe has edges we cannot cross, places where light stops, where space-time folds so steeply that nothing returns. These are singularities, regions of infinite density, where our equations break and the language of physics begins to stutter. And yet, as we search the cosmos for these mysterious centers of gravity, we begin to notice something strange. There may be another singularity, not in the stars above, but in the quiet recess of the self. It's a gentle proposal. What if the black hole singularity is not just an astronomical object, but a metaphor? What if it reflects something we already carry inside? Your thoughts form a kind of space, not in meters or miles, but in meanings, dimensions of memory, desire, sensation, and imagination. You navigate this space without realizing it. You move from past to present, from image to word, from feeling to action. But at the center of it all, there's a point you cannot reach, a place inside you that remains unlit. Try to find it. Look inward, and you'll find thoughts about yourself, your name, your memories, your roles in the world. You might recall being a child or picture who you'll be tomorrow. But who is the you doing the looking? What part of you watches your thoughts form then vanish? What sees the seeing? That center is elusive. No matter how many layers of thought you peel back, you never arrive at a single stable core. The self observing the self always steps just out of reach, and that in its own way is a singularity. Just as we cannot describe the interior of a black hole without new physics, we cannot fully describe consciousness with current science. We can study its correlates, brainwaves, chemical signals, cognitive states, but not the thing itself. We know what it does. We don't know what it is. Consciousness is the black hole of the inner world. It shapes experience but resists definition. It bends everything around it but remains unseen. It may not be infinite, but it is unresolved. A point where our models fall silent. And like a black hole, it has a boundary. In physics, this is the event horizon. In the mind, it might be the limit of introspection, the point where you can no longer observe without changing what is being observed. Just as an astronaut falling into a black hole cannot report what lies beyond, you cannot fully watch your own awareness. The moment you try, it shifts. This is not a flaw. It may be the structure of awareness itself, recursive, circular, gently veiled. We live inside this boundary, and yet we live through it. Everything we feel, everything we know, passes through this center of gravity we cannot touch. And here's where metaphor and science begin to rhyme. If our universe came from a singularity, a point of infinite compression, a collapse into being, then perhaps you, in a small and beautiful way, are also the result of such a collapse. Billions of years of atoms and stars, chance and choice, compressed into a single flicker of perspective, a quiet singularity that dreams. Physics has long warned us not to anthropomorphize the universe, not to treat galaxies like people or gravity like emotion. But there is something poetic about the symmetry. A singularity births space, time, matter, and it may also birth a mind. And what lies beyond a black hole, that remains unknown. Some say it's an end, others say it's a gateway to a white hole, a new universe, a strange fold in higher dimensions. Likewise, what lies beyond consciousness, beyond waking awareness, may also be unknowable, a dream, a death, a doorway. And if the universe is itself a black hole, if our cosmos lies inside such a singularity, then perhaps your mind is not a thing within the universe, but a reflection of its very nature. That would mean consciousness is not an accident, but an echo. Not a glitch, but a mirror. In ancient traditions, people spoke of enlightenment as seeing the true self. In modern physics, we seek to understand the true structure of the universe. Maybe both are seeking the same thing, the center of experience, the point from which everything flows yet which cannot be directly seen. The singularity within may not be measurable, But it is not nothing. It is the stillness behind thought, the pause between breaths, the quiet certainty that even when you cannot explain what you still are, and maybe that is enough. In the final session of this part, we'll explore the idea that consciousness itself may be a kind of nested reality, a dream folded inside a dream, shaped by boundaries, but never fully contained. And we'll ask softly, if black holes can contain universes, might minds contain something just as vast? Picture a dream, not a wild, chaotic one filled with shifting landscapes and impossible physics, but a quiet dream where everything feels just plausible enough to pass as real. Maybe you're walking through a house you used to live in. Maybe someone you lost is standing beside you again. Or maybe you're just doing something mundane, boiling water, tying your shoes, sitting at a desk. And in the dream, it all makes sense until you wake up. And the world rearranges itself again. Dreams are nested realities, internal spaces governed by logic, sensation, and emotion. But they don't obey the rules of the outside world. Time flows strangely. Distances shift. Stories begin and end without reason. Yet within them, we often don't notice. We accept their terms. We adapt to their laws. In this way, dreams are not just curiosities. They are metaphors for something larger. Because if the mind can generate entire environments, spaces with their own physics, their own stories, their own inner coherence, then perhaps reality too is something nested. Perhaps it's layers all the way down, or all the way up. Just as we've explored the idea that our universe might exist inside a black hole, a structure formed from collapse bounded by a horizon and potentially containing its own space-time, it's worth considering that consciousness may be built the same way. A small, bounded structure, a horizon, a space within a space. Let's take this slowly. When you open your eyes, you see a room, you feel the temperature, you hear distant sounds. But all of that is happening not out there, not in the world itself, but inside your awareness. Your brain constructs a model, a mental rendering of physical inputs. What you call the external world is already internalized, already transformed. In a sense, your waking life is a simulation too, a real-time interface, a map, not the territory. Now take that further. Inside your waking awareness, you can imagine something. Maybe a memory, maybe a dream, maybe a future hope. That imagined world is a nested space within your awareness, a layer beneath the surface. You can shift your attention from the room you're sitting in to a childhood moment, or to a conversation you might have tomorrow. In that shift, you've moved between realities, each with its own context, its own emotional tone, its own rules. These mental shifts aren't just thoughts, they're domains, and in each one, you are present. You are the center. You are the observer. So where is the real you? Is it the waking self? The dreaming self? The remembering self? Or are all of these just rooms inside a much larger house, one that you move through without ever quite seeing the whole structure? The idea of nested realities is not new. Philosophers have long wondered whether life itself is a kind of dream. From Plato's cave to Descartes' demon, from Buddhist illusions to modern simulation theory, the idea recurs again and again. What if what we experience is only a layer? What if there's something behind the curtain, but instead of fearing that question, of seeing it as a threat to truth, what if we treated it like an invitation to let go of needing a final layer, to stop chasing the realist reality, and instead to notice how every level, every experience carries its own truth. In physics, brane cosmology imagines that universes are like sheets floating in higher dimensions. Our universe could be one such sheet, and black holes might be the tunnels between them, layers of reality connected by curvature. In the mind, perhaps thoughts are brains too, layers of experience, some tightly bound like our identity. some more fluid, like our fantasies, but all shaped by unseen forces: memory, emotion, biology, the limits of language. The more we explore these metaphors, the more they begin to echo each other. A black hole hides its interior behind an event horizon. So does the mind. A universe may begin from a singularity, unfolding from compression into vastness. So might a single idea. Each time you have a thought, something emerges from silence. A form appears from formlessness. A reality is born, if only for a moment, and then it dissolves back into the background. Just as stars collapse, galaxies evolve, and perhaps entire universes flicker into being inside the darkness of black holes. Maybe reality is not a hierarchy, but a tapestry. Not one reality inside another, but realities side by side, overlapping, recurring, dreaming each other. And you, small as you feel, are not at the bottom of that structure. You are woven into it. You're not outside the cosmos, nor merely inside it. You're part of how it knows itself. Your awareness is not separate from the laws of physics. It may be one of their most beautiful expressions. A black hole curves space. So do you, when you remember something. A singularity births a universe. So do you, when you imagine a world that doesn't exist yet. And if, in the quiet dark of a dream, you find yourself walking through impossible places, hearing voices that no longer belong to this world, then maybe that's not madness. Maybe that's resonance. A mind echoing the shape of a universe that also contains mysteries, horizons, and the unknowable. Maybe we're not meant to pierce every veil. Maybe we're only meant to notice how soft and layered everything is. Let's take a breath here. After all the spiraling through gravitational wells, the delicate folding of dimensions, and the quiet reflections on minds and mirrors, it's worth slowing down to ask, what if it's not true? What if the idea that we live inside a black hole is wrong? Not wrong in the dismissive sense, not in the way we toss aside bad ideas, but wrong in the most beautiful way, an idea that stretched our imagination, illuminated hidden corners of physics, connected faraway concepts, and gave us a new metaphor to feel the universe with. Even if the hypothesis isn't accurate, its very existence has added something meaningful to our understanding. The black hole universe theory, while elegant and compelling, still lives mostly in the realm of speculation. There is, as of now, no direct evidence that our universe is the interior of a black hole. Observations of the cosmos reveal many strange things, but they don't yet show a boundary like an event horizon, nor a singularity at the edge of time. Instead, we see uniform expansion, space growing in every direction, not spiraling inward toward collapse. That expansion, as observed through galaxies rushing away from us, and the stretching of light into redshifts, is surprisingly isotropic. No center, no edge. Every observer, wherever they are, sees themselves as central, not because they are, but because space itself is expanding everywhere, all at once. This is very different from the behavior of a black hole, which pulls things inward toward a specific center. In our universe, galaxies are not falling toward anything. They are drifting apart, carried by the smooth fabric of space stretching silently between them. This kind of expansion is difficult to reconcile with a black hole interior, at least as currently understood. And then there's dark energy, the strange, repulsive force causing the expansion of the universe to accelerate over time. If we were inside a black hole, the acceleration of space would require unusual conditions at the boundary, conditions that don't clearly match what we observe. The theory would need to account for how dark energy operates from inside the event horizon of a parent black hole, and so far, it doesn't. Entropy poses another puzzle. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that disorder increases over time. In a black hole, entropy is encoded on the event horizon. In our universe, entropy is vast, but not at its theoretical maximum. That suggests we're far from equilibrium, still moving, changing, evolving. If the universe were a black hole's interior, why hasn't it already reached thermal stillness? These are just a few of the theoretical and observational challenges that gently lean against the hypothesis. None of them conclusively disprove it, but they remind us that elegance isn't evidence, and that even the most poetic idea must pass through the crucible of data. And yet, here's the heart of it. We need ideas like this. We need hypotheses that leap across boundaries, that dare to connect the infinitesimal with the infinite, the personal with the cosmic. We need frameworks that stir not just equations, but emotions, that wake us in the middle of the night wondering, what if? Because science is not just a process of elimination, it's a creative act. Every discovery began as a guess. Every revolution in understanding began as a strange proposal no one could prove yet. And often, the guesses that turn out to be wrong still leave behind gifts, new tools, new methods, new language. They point the way toward the next mystery. In fact, much of modern physics rests on ideas once considered preposterous. The curvature of space-time, the expansion of the universe, the idea that time runs differently at different altitudes. Each began as a strange thought, a puzzle, a what-if that refused to sit still. The black hole universe theory may be like that. Perhaps it will evolve. Perhaps a modified version will fit better with what we observe. Or perhaps it will fade into history, replaced by something even stranger. That's not failure. That's how knowledge grows. Not in a straight line, but in waves, surges, revisions. And while it's true that we may never know the true shape of the cosmos, at least not completely, we do know that our attempts to describe it change us. The act of imagining, of modelling, of folding the universe into ideas, reshapes our sense of where we are and what we're part of. Even if we're not inside a black hole, we're inside something. A space vast enough to contain billions of galaxies, a time long enough to stretch across billions of years, a mystery deep enough to hold all the questions we've asked tonight and still have room left over. So if you feel a twinge of disappointment that this theory may not be the one, let it pass like a breeze. Let it be replaced by something quieter and perhaps more enduring. Or does not depend on certainty. It thrives in the presence of the unknown, in the curve of a shadow, in the silence between signals, in the distance between stars, in the simple, undeniable truth that you are here, alive, aware, and able to wonder. That's what this theory gave us, a way to wonder differently, not just about where we are, but about what where even means. Not just about how the universe began, but whether beginnings are even real. Not just about singularities in space, but singularities in thought, points where everything else breaks down and something entirely new begins. So we pause here, not at the end of certainty, but at the beginning of openness. And in our next and final session, we'll lay our questions down completely, not to forget them, but to let them rest beside us. We'll drift not away from the mystery, but into it. We'll close our eyes not because we're done looking, but because sometimes the deepest truths are the ones we carry with us into dreams. And so we arrive at the edge of our journey, though not the edge of the mystery. The idea we've wandered through tonight may hold truth, or it may not. Perhaps we are living inside a black hole, perhaps inside something stranger, or perhaps inside something so ordinary that only our need for wonder makes it seem profound. What remains, as we leave this thought behind, is not just a theory. It's a quiet awareness, a feeling shaped like curiosity, a gentler way of resting beside the unknown. Tonight, we followed the bending of space through collapsed stars and infinite depths. We watched time slow to a whisper at the rim of gravity's well. We imagined worlds within worlds, hidden behind the horizon's veil. We traced the shimmering ring of light around M87, the trembling waves of space-time from merging titans, and the soft return of a thought to its source. Now, as the stars begin to fade behind the curtain of sleep, we turn not to conclusion but to calm, a closing breath, a final hum. You, here and now, are floating in a universe you did not choose, and yet it flows through you. It gives you air, warmth, gravity, the weight of your hand, the rhythm of your heart, the quiet drift between waking and dreaming. Whether the cosmos began in a singularity or in something we cannot yet name, it began. It stretched, unfolded, became stars, oceans, moments, and you. And that, perhaps, is the greatest wonder of all, that something vast enough to curve time also found room for a mind small enough to ask why, that within the fabric of equations and echoes, awareness took shape, a thought, a question, a listener. Maybe the universe is inside a black hole. Maybe the black hole is part of something larger still. Or maybe all of it is one long story, whispered again and again in different languages of light and time, a dream folded inside a dream, a thought folded inside a thought, and you folded gently inside the soft gravity of sleep. Perhaps that is why this theory matters, not because it solves, but because it opens a door, a breath, a moment where uncertainty feels like peace. So rest now, little universe. Whether nested within another or adrift in endless quiet, you are whole. Your questions are not noise, they are music. They are part of the pattern. Close your eyes and let horizons fade into stillness. Let space-time ripple softly through you, like a lullaby too deep to hear. Let the center of your thoughts grow quiet, not from certainty, but from wonder. You've listened, you've imagined, you've asked, and now it's all right to rest. Sleep, small reflection of the cosmos. Sleep and drift between what is known and what is possible, between memory and myth, between the thought and the dream that carries it. Sleep in the arms of curiosity, where the unknown is not shadow but sky. And if, in your dreams, you find yourself falling, through stars, through time, through spirals of light, know this: you're not falling into emptiness. You are falling into a question, and the question is holding you gently. Sleep now, little echo of the universe, will still be here when you wake, still wondering, still listening, still dreaming.